Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're diving into something really important, a look at the U.S. immigration system, specifically enforcement. It can be incredibly complex and honestly sometimes quite surprising. We're going to focus on a recent case, a really high-profile one actually, that shows how even people who seem to have everything in order, legally speaking, can hit these unexpected, really harrowing roadblocks. Our goal here is to try and untangle some of those knots in policy and see how they actually play out for people on the ground.
That's exactly right. And we're really asking a pretty fundamental, maybe even unsettling question today. How does someone who's living here legally, they have documents that look perfectly valid, how do they suddenly end up detained, maybe even facing removal? We'll use this specific case to kind of peel back the layers. We'll look at official discretion, how it's used or maybe not used. We'll touch on policy shifts, which are significant. And it all circles back to just how crucial it is to understand every single detail of your immigration status. It's a fine line sometimes.
Okay, let's get into the specifics then. The case involves Sarah Shaw, she's a woman from New Zealand, and her young son, Isaac, who's 6 years old. Now, Sarah had been living legally in Washington state for 3 years. Settled, working, part of the community. Everything seemed okay on the surface.
Yeah, seemingly stable.
Exactly. But then July 2025 rolls around. She takes what seems like a very routine trip, just hops over the border to Vancouver, Canada. The plan was simple. Drop off her 2 older kids for a flight to New Zealand to see their grandparents. Lots of families near the border do this kind of thing. But when she tried to come back into the U.S. with Isaac, that's when they were stopped. And everything changed very, very quickly.
Right. And this is where the legal tangle really starts. It wasn't straightforward at all. Sarah had something called a combo card. Think of it like, well, it serves 2 functions. It's a work permit, and it's also a travel document. She believed the whole card, including the travel permission, had been extended. That's what she thought. But, and this is the absolute key point, the underlying reason for her status, this Form I-360 application she filed under VOA.
That's the Violence Against Women Act.
Correct. Filed because her marriage ended with domestic abuse allegations. That specific application was still pending. And critically, the travel authorization part tied to that VOA application hadn't been renewed. Her lawyer actually told her, look, tell the border officers about the pending VOA case. Ask specifically for humanitarian parole. But that misunderstanding about the combo card's validity, specifically for travel based on the pending VOA case, that was the flashpoint.
Wow. So even though she tried to follow her lawyer's advice, asked for humanitarian parole, the border officials refused.
They refused the request, yeah.
What happened immediately after that?
Well, it sounds incredibly disorienting. Sarah described being, quote, bundled into a giant white van with no markings. Very unsettling. And then driven many states away to Texas, to the South Texas Family Residential Center in Dilley. That's like 2,000 miles from her home in Washington.
2,000 miles?
Yeah. The whole thing was so sudden, so secretive, she said she initially thought she was being kidnapped.
I can't even imagine the fear, just bundled into a van with your child and driven across the country.
And think about Isaac, her son. His situation was even more complex, legally speaking. His own travel document was perfectly valid. He was lawfully admissible. No question about his papers. But because of anti-family separation policies, which, ironically kept him detained with his mother, even though Sarah asked for his father or a family friend to come pick him up, his lawyer was very clear, saying Isaac's detention was, quote, not legal at all.
Yeah.
It really shows the sometimes unintended consequences of broad policies in specific complex situations.
And the place they were held, this facility in Dilley, Texas.
Yeah.
What were the conditions like?
Sarah and a friend of hers, Victoria Bessing-Saul, described them as horrible conditions. They said it was very similar to a prison. They were apparently kept in a locked room with 5 bunk beds. They could walk around a common area between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m., but otherwise locked in. Sarah's phone was taken away, cutting off contact. She couldn't wear her own clothes. Just adds to the feeling of, dehumanization.
Yeah.
And another layer of isolation. They were apparently among the only English speakers there. Most others spoke Spanish. So communication, finding comfort, very difficult.
That sounds incredibly isolating. And how long did this go on for? It wasn't just a day or 2.
No, not at all. They were held for nearly 4 weeks, from July 24th until around August 15th or 16th, 2025.
Almost a month. For her and a 6-year-old child. In those conditions. Thousands of miles from home.
It's a significant amount of time, especially for a child. It really speaks to the bureaucratic inertia sometimes involved.
Okay, let's zoom out a bit and connect this really harrowing personal story to the wider legal framework. You mentioned Form I-360. Can you explain that a bit more?
Sure. So Form I-360 is a USCIS form, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. It's used for quite a few special immigrant categories. Think religious workers, certain military folks, and importantly, as in Sarah's case, abused spouses or children of U.S. citizens or permanent residents under VAWA. Now, the crucial thing to understand about the combo card she had is this. While it physically grants work and travel permission, its actual validity depends entirely on the underlying petition being approved and active. The card itself isn't a standalone guarantee, you see, it's linked. And that distinction between the card looking valid and the actual status of the underlying petition, that's what tripped her up at the border. Agents look for current, fully authorized documentation for each specific purpose.
I see. And the humanitarian parole she asked for, you said it was refused. What exactly is that?
Humanitarian parole. It's a specific power immigration officials have. It's discretionary, meaning they can use it, but they don't have to. It allows someone temporary entry or stay in the U.S. for, well, urgent humanitarian reasons, or if there's a significant public benefit. Now, Sarah's lawyer made a really interesting point here. They said parole was, quote, routinely used prior to the Trump administration in situations like Sarah's. That suggests a real shift in how this tool is being applied. What might have been a routine way to handle someone with a pending humanitarian case and strong ties seems to have become much, much harder to get. That shift directly impacted Sarah.
Right, so that leads us to the broader picture of enforcement. We hear about ICE, Customs and Border Protection, CBP. What guides their actions? How do they decide who to detain?
Well, there's this concept called prosecutorial discretion. It's actually outlined in DHS Department of Homeland Security guidelines. Essentially, it recognizes that federal officials have a lot of leeway in deciding who to arrest, detain, or remove. They can't go after everyone. So the stated priority is focusing resources on threats to national security, public safety, border security. Makes sense. But the guidelines also list mitigating factors. These are reasons not to take enforcement action.
Okay, like what kind of factors?
Things like how long someone's lived in the U.S., the impacts removing them would have on their family, like losing a caregiver, which clearly applied to Isaac. Also, eligibility for humanitarian protection, like Sarah's pending VIWA case. The fact that Sarah, who seemed to tick several of those mitigating factor boxes, was still detained, well, it raises serious questions about how that discretion is actually being used right now. It feels more like a default towards enforcement.
Yeah, and her lawyer's comment really struck me, calling the detention legal but unreasonable and unnecessary, and blaming, quote, draconian abusive enforcement. The fact the lawyer wasn't surprised is telling.
It is telling. It suggests that for practitioners on the ground, this kind of outcome, sadly, isn't seen as an anomaly anymore in the current climate. It paints a picture of a system perceived as rigid, sometimes harsh.
And this ties into the whole issue of family detention policies, which seem to be constantly changing, right?
Absolutely. It's a real political football.
Yeah.
You had the Biden administration stopping family detention in late 2021. But then, by early 2025, reports surfaced they were considering bringing it back for families crossing illegally, maybe for short periods as Title 42 was ending. Even short periods is a shift, though, and it impacts facilities like Dilley.
And this was different from the previous administration.
Well, yes, the Trump administration had tightened policies significantly earlier in 2025. That led to more raids, more detentions for things like visa overstays, or even just small paperwork errors. It created a lot of uncertainty for people here legally, not just border crossers.
You mentioned the conditions earlier. Are there ongoing concerns about these family detention centers?
Very much so. Dilley and Karn City in Texas are large facilities, holding potentially thousands. Advocates consistently report alarming conditions. I mean, really disturbing reports. Adults fighting children for clean water, serious medical needs not being met properly, kids with swollen feet, potential concussions not fully checked out. Plus, lawyers and advocates often say their access to these places is limited, which raises huge questions about oversight and due process.
That's deeply concerning. And isn't there some kind of legal standard about detaining children?
Yes, there is. It's called the Flores Settlement Agreement. It's a court agreement from decades ago that limits how long children can be held in immigration detention currently. The standard is around 20 days. The previous administration actively tried to get rid of Flores to allow indefinite detention. And there's even proposed legislation, like the House passed One Big Beautiful Bill Act. Its name aside, that would explicitly allow indefinite family detention and override Flores protections, even using unlicensed facilities. So the pressure to detain longer is there.
Wow. And on top of all that, there are financial barriers too.
Right. Congress increased funding for detention in the 2025 budget, and new fees were introduced that year, $100 just to apply for asylum, $550 for temporary protected status, nearly $900 for some appeals. Advocates argue this basically prices lower-income families out of seeking legal protection. It makes it harder just to access the system.
So putting this all together, Sarah's story, the policy shifts, the discretion issues, what's the takeaway for, anyone listening who holds a visa in the U.S.? It's not just about asylum seekers, is it?
Absolutely not. That's a critical point. Sarah's case is a stark reminder that these immigration crackdowns, this intense scrutiny, it doesn't just impact undocumented individuals. People here perfectly legally on all sorts of visas work, student, family. They can still face really severe consequences if they don't maintain absolutely perfect records, if they miss a renewal deadline, or if they unknowingly violate some new procedural rule. The rules are shifting constantly, and even a small administrative slip-up, as we saw with Sarah, can snowball into something truly devastating. The margin for error feels incredibly slim right now.
What are some common pitfalls people might encounter?
Oh, there are several common ones we see. Things like letting documents expire even by a day, or filing renewals late, changing jobs, or even just your job duties without getting the proper updated approvals first. That's a big one. International travel without the absolutely correct, up-to-date documentation, especially if you have any kind of pending application like Sarah did. That's high risk. For students, maybe working off campus without authorization seems minor, but it's a status violation. And complications with dependent visas, spouses and kids often need their status maintained separately. These seemingly small missteps under the current enforcement climate, they really can escalate very quickly into serious legal trouble.
It sounds incredibly daunting. So what can people do? Is it just about being hyper-vigilant?
Vigilance is key, but proactive steps are even better. And honestly, the most critical thing is getting qualified legal help. Early legal intervention is truly the best way to protect yourself. Don't wait until there's a problem. A good immigration lawyer can review your entire record, spot potential risks you might not even be aware of, and advise on the right steps. They can also represent you if you do face an interview or inspection. And please, don't rely on advice from friends or stuff you read on online forums or even old government website FAQs. As we've discussed, immigration law is shifting so fast. What was true 6 months ago might be wrong today. You need current, expert advice.
Okay, so despite this incredibly difficult ordeal, there was a positive outcome for Sarah and Isaac in the end.
Thankfully, yes. After nearly 4 weeks, around mid-August 2025, they were released. They were able to return home to Washington State.
That's a relief to hear. How did their release come about? Was it just the system working eventually?
Well, it seems like community and other pressures played a really significant role. It wasn't just quiet administrative action. There was a GoFundMe campaign set up that raised over $53,000, which is amazing, huge support there. Her union, the Washington Federation of State Employees, got involved and advocated for her. Collective voices matter. Media attention was also crucial. It kept her story visible, didn't let it get buried. And interestingly, the New Zealand embassy confirmed they made consular contact after learning about the case from the media. So that added diplomatic weight too. All these things together, the fundraising, the union, the media, the diplomatic contact, likely pressured the system and helped expedite the release. It shows advocacy can make a real difference.
That's a powerful point. So ultimately, Sarah and Isaac's story, while deeply personal and quite harrowing, really shines a light on the unpredictable nature of immigration enforcement today. Even with what seems like valid paperwork, it shows how a pending petition, especially something complex like VIWA, can create major problems, and the consequences for families can be severe, involving long detentions far from home. But it also shows, as you just said, the power of people speaking up, of community support, and definitely of getting good legal help.
Precisely.
So just to quickly recap the main points from our deep dive today, we've looked at the really intricate, constantly changing world of U.S. immigration rules. We've seen the absolute necessity of paying meticulous attention to every detail of your documents and status, and we've discussed the huge impact that discretion, how enforcement decisions are made on the ground, can have on people's lives.
Yeah, and maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to take away. Think about that constant balancing act immigration policy tries to strike. National security, public safety, border integrity versus humanitarian concerns, family unity. How that balance is struck, or perhaps where it falters, profoundly shapes the lives of real people like Sarah and Isaac. Understanding those systemic pressures, those competing priorities, can maybe help us all engage with these complex issues more critically and perhaps with more empathy. Their story really underscores the need for ongoing vigilance, support, and maybe reform within this whole global context of movement and national borders.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. It's been a really important discussion. All the best, and we will meet again with another important subject in the next deep dive.